All right, welcome back to a bonus episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So, without further ado, let me tell you what we're doing right now. We're getting ready to release some of the archive that we found from when we were the sci-fi shenanigans. We're going to get those up there for the posts that were brought down. We thought you might enjoy them, and so without further ado, let us roll that beautiful. Oh wait, they're going to sue me. Play it.
Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans. Time for your daily dose of insanity over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast with your hosts, J.R. Handley and me, Chris Winder. Just two nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. Without further ado.
All right. Thank you for listening yet again to another episode. So today we are bringing you an author duo. We have Kacey Ezell and Marisa Wolfe, who are co-writing some epic awesomeness in the Four Horsemen universe. So first, let's introduce... Yay! Explosion!
Yay!
So we have Kacey Ezell, who is an active duty U.S. Air Force pilot. Nobody's perfect, but, go Army. A wife, mother, and kick-butt storyteller of tall tales. She's been traditionally published by Baen Books and written for small presses like Chris Kennedy's Publishing. And she's also, spoiler, but she's got some scientist friends she's going to try to wrangle up for us so we can talk to actual real experts on stuff. So that is woohoo.
Yeah,
that
I'm
is
pretty
Kacey.
good at talking my friends into doing things, right, Risa?
Yes, this is accurate.
Outstanding. I like the persuasion. And so the other guest today is Marisa Wolfe, or Risa. She's a former middle school teacher, now working in the education nonprofit world, who lists herself as, and I quote, a baby author who has two short stories with small and independent presses, the Copper Dog Publishing and Chris Kennedy Publishing, and is co-writing, as we said, a novel with Kacey coming on February 23rd. So you should be out right about the time you're hearing this. Oh, and apparently, this is her little tidbit about herself. She once headbutted an alligator.
In my defense, the alligator headbutted me. Just want to clarify.
I'm sure it had it coming. But the real question that everybody in the 101st wants to know, did you make a sweet pair of jump boots out of them?
No, I didn't get to eat it, unfortunately.
I didn't say eat it. I mean, that's cool too. I just want to know what kind of boots you made out of them.
Yeah. No, it lived its life. I'm sure It's an 11-foot monster now out in the world waiting to headbutt innocent people.
What a softie.
I was 24. I was very surprised.
Okay. I guess you get the passive youth. So the other part after the introduction that we like to do is tell the audience how we first found people. And so I found Kacey at RavenCon in, I think it was 2017. I remember Chris Kennedy introduced us, and all I remember was she was super friendly. She was sitting on a panel about writing military and science fiction and fantasy with a combination of authors. She was pretty fun. I seem to remember someone making an Air Force joke, and her reply was Moab, and then an expletive, which we won't repeat here because, kids listen. And then we just sort of stayed in touch, and she's fun to get to know. I've seen her interviews on the Keystroke Medium YouTube channel, which were a blast. If you haven't seen it, you should check that out. And Chris, did you know her before this podcast?
No, apparently I've been living under a rock. Either that or JR knows literally everyone.
I think maybe JR knows everyone.
I think so.
See,
that's the feeling I'm getting.
See, the trick is one, I just give no flying Fs, and I just don't care if people tell me no, so I'll talk to anybody.
Yes, no fear of rejection.
None at all.
Nice.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
And so we neither one of us knew Marisa. We met her through Kacey as her co-writer and friend. So we're both all of us are gonna meet her for the first time today. Woo! New friends.
Yay!
Yeah. So
All right.
Marisa and I met, gosh, a really long time ago, and we met through basically Dragon Riders of Pern fan club online, and our shared love, right? And so our shared love of dragons and riders and the shenanigans that they get up to together was what originally brought us together and got us riding together. And then when I started working on Assassin in the Four Horsemen universe for Chris Kennedy and Mark Wandry, I realized that I really wanted to do that. I wanted to tell the story in such a way that I required a little bit of help. So I was like, well, who do I know that's a kick-ass writer, kick butt writer? And I'm sorry, you're going to have a hard time with me and my mouth. I apologize. But yeah, so I called her and said, hey, what are you doing? You want to write a book? And she said, yes, thankfully. Because it really, the story is really good. And it would not have been nearly as dramatic and fun and epic without Marisa's contributions. So,
well, that's nice and sanitary. You want to know how I got Chris to write with me? I found those compromising pictures, and I said, "You write this book, or these might accidentally go online. I don't know. I'm not saying I would do it.
The money."
See, my guess would have been, you write this book, or else I will keep these pictures private. I imagine you want those out in the world, no?
Well, he was a Marine, so all bets are off.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm almost speechless.
See, the hard part with Chris is he gets so into listening to the interviews, sometimes we have to remind him he's the host.
Right.
We had that problem with Josh. It was when we did the Josh Hayes interview. It was reminding him, hey, you're supposed to be the co-host.
Yeah. Right, that this is actually being recorded and that I need to participate.
He was just enthralled.
Josh is a fun guy. He's really really interesting and has a lot of great stories and stuff too. So it would be easy to fall into that trap, I think, with him.
Yeah, we talked to him about his what was it, Peter Pan and Space books. So that was definitely interesting. But he's come out of hell, so he talks a lot more now. I think he gets 10 words an episode.
Just keep going up from here.
I'm never going to live it down.
No, not at all.
All right, well, let's get the first question out of the way. So let's start with Kacey. What do you love about science fiction? What draws you to this genre?
I started reading science fiction when I was pretty little. I was about 7, I think, the first time I held a science fiction book in my hands. And, with the intent of reading it, I probably picked them up and walked around with them before then. But the thing that was so attractive to me about it was just this is probably going to sound a little cheesy, but just the endless possibilities of it, like even these things that we were writing about that we didn't necessarily have today, we maybe could have at some point in the future. And that was something that fired my imagination, even as a little kid. And that's never gone away. My good friend and co-author John Ringo is constantly grousing on Facebook about how science keeps catching up with the stuff he's written that is science fiction. And he's continually complaining about how, science is going to put him out of a job one day, which I think is just really funny, but really cool too, because, the idea that we can dream up all of these things and then turn to our scientist buddies and be like, all right, let's go make it happen. That I think is something that's very appealing to me.
I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, but the Albacurean cube drive, that's a theory on actual FTL, whether it's workable. The scientist that created that was actually a sci-fi fan and wanted to see if he could make it work.
Yeah, I'm sure. And, we're human beings, right? Stories inspire us. So I dig stories that inspire us to reach to the stars because, it'd be cool to go hang out there someday.
Hopefully the taxes will be cheaper out
there. Yeah, no kidding.
So what about you, Marisa? What do you love specifically about science fiction?
Yeah, it's similar. It's the what if of everything. I feel like we don't get to know the end of the story, like where humanity goes post our lifetime. And so science fiction is that way of let's see, it could be this, or it could have happened like this. Like we get our own clue endings all the time, which I love.
I also like that because depending on what mood you're in, you could say maybe the future's awesome, maybe the future's terrible, and here's how it could possibly happen.
Yes.
So yeah, you can do everything from comedy to horror to anything in between.
Yeah, I mean, you can go bleak like the road. You can go Hitchhiker's Guide. I mean, anything. It's I love that, thinking about this is what society could be like if we do this thing, or if we do that thing, or if these kinds of aliens find us. I mean, endless.
One of the other things I like about science fiction as a genre is that it lends itself to blending with other genres very, very well. We at MarsCon a couple weeks ago, Marisa and I both attended, and that seemed to be a recurring theme throughout a lot of the programming that we were at, was this idea of transcending genre, or going through genres, and I self-identified myself as a genre fluid writer because I like to mix that stuff up. But science fiction specifically, you can, like right now I'm working on a sci-fi noir with my friend Griffin Barber, who wrote 1636 Mission of the Mughals with Eric Flint for Bain. He and I are working on a sci-fi noir story. So it's like that gritty detective story, with the femme fatale and everybody has an ulterior motive, but it still works really well in a sci-fi setting. I mean, just look at things like Blade Runner, for example, really lends itself to that type of genre. And yet, by that same token, you have something like Hitchhiker's Guide, that's just, it's funny and it's a romp and it's, a little bit absurdist. You have incredible romantic love stories in sci-fi. I mean, Han and Leia, for example, is one of the classic love stories that people talk about all the time. And it's but it still lends itself and interweaves really well with the sci-fi setting. So that's another reason I think that I'm particularly drawn to this genre specifically.
Okay. So what's your first, we'll start with Marisa this time. What's your first memory of watching, reading, or playing games, doing your first act where you're in the science fiction genre and you say, this is for me?
Oh, yeah. So I would say step one was just watching Star Trek and Star Wars with my dad. So I've never lived in a world without Star Wars, and that is, I think, the way it should be. And then I think my second time when I realized this is worth sort of fighting for, I was sweet talking the librarian to let me take out more than the limit of books so I could get the whole Narnia series. And like just a bunch of, I just really needed a lot of books. And it worked because I was a giant nerd even when I was like 7. And she could just see that like nerdness shining in my face and was like, all right, fine, you can take out extra books. It was amazing.
I've done that before. That is a lot of fun. And it feels like a win, even though really the librarian feels like she got a win too.
Yes. Yeah, like I like to say I sweet talked, but I'm sure like I twisted her arm super hard. I'm sure she was like, yes, young lady, you can have all the books. Here you go.
For me,
you, Kacey?
It was probably, I feel like I answer this question the same way for so many, or I feel like I give this answer for so many different questions relating to like important moments in my life. But for me, it was reading Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Realms at age 7. I read about these people that were, far future descendants of Earth, riding around on the backs of dragons. Was like, yes, please. That's what I want to do with my life. And
me too.
and so here I am. And that really shaped me.
Yes, I would like a pet dragon too.
Yeah, but they're not pets though.
Mm-hmm.
I think some
partner. Yes.
Oh.
Partner.
True.
I think something else I like about science fiction, and I've just discovered this recently, is you were talking about the genre mixing, like mixing the sci-fi and the fantasy, really having spells or having magicians or having magic in space could be explained by technology. The author C. Clarke quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. You could always just say, wink, it's technology. But it looks just like magic. It acts just like magic. It's so much fun to mix that together.
Yeah, the hand waving of it all.
We actually did a little bit of that in Assassin. So for those in your audience who aren't super familiar, Assassin is a book that exists in the Four Horsemen universe, which is a universe created by Mark Wandry and Chris Kennedy. And the main thrust of most of the series is that it's a galactic environment whose economy essentially runs on mercenary activity. But Marisa and I had the opportunity to write about a race called the Depic, which are this felinoid race of really sociopathic assassin killers that are super cute and fuzzy at the same time. And like cats, basically. They're cats. So Catsassins. And one of the things that so Chris Kennedy actually created the race kind of as a in a cameo in The Golden Horde, his mainline novel, The Golden Horde. And what he talked about is that they were immune to nerve agents that worked on pretty much everyone else, and that they could appear to disappear. And so one of the fun things that Marisa and I got to do in developing this race a little further, to have their own standalone novel, was figure out exactly how those things worked and how we could create those quote unquote magical effects and explain them with the use of technology and biology and alien physiology and stuff. And it was, I thought that was a lot of fun. I don't know if you did, Marisa, but that was one of the highlights for me.
Now, did she co-write the short story that got so much acclaim in the anthology, or was that already existing when Marisa came in?
So there's actually 3 short stories in that deal with this race. The first one was Gilded Cage in the first Four Horsemen anthology called A Fistful of Credits. That one was mine.
That's the one I've read.
Yes, that one was mine. And thank you for your kind words about it. And then shortly after that, that's when Chris Kennedy approached me about expanding the whole thing out to write a novel, a full length novel. And so I said yes. And then I called Marisa and said, hey, help, please help. and so in the,
she used Gilded Cage as the pitch. She sent it to me and she's like, oh, hey, I wrote this story. Just tell me what you think. All casual, because that's how Kacey gets you. You absolutely did. And then I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, Kacey, this is so good. And she's like, oh yeah, right? Thanks. I really like it. So yeah, you want to write a novel in this world? Like, yes.
Whatever works.
I remember reading that story too. And I remember thinking when she got to the collaring scene and I was like, oh no, she didn't. And then I kept reading because I thought for sure she was going to go somewhere totally different. And that's all I kept thinking was, oh no, she didn't. Yeah. Oh no, she didn't. And then I had to check because, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Terry Mixon. He's one of the co-hosts at the Dead Robot Society, but him and Paulie Cooley, the host, have like this weird obsession with cats. So I was like, I had to check and make sure he didn't write that.
He did write a story in the first anthology, I think. I don't remember.
He did, but he didn't write about the cats. I just had to go back and check. I was like, wait a minute.
No.
So, all right. So transitioning. So what made you decide to go from, just Uber fan, where I think all of us started, to I'm going to actually tell my own stories and write my own stuff in the science fiction world? And Marisa, you can go first since Kacey just got done talking.
Oh, sure. So shockingly, we haven't heard about this yet. Fan fiction. So for me, it was reading the porn books, and the internet was this new, shiny, developing thing. And I went on to AOL message boards.
Yes, I remember those. You got mail.
Right? Oh my God, amazing. That modem noise will haunt me until the day I die. So I went there and found all of these other people obsessed with Anne McCaffrey and Pern. And then it was one of those like, oh, wait, we don't have to wait for more books. We can write our own stories. Yes, let's do that. Previously, I had written stories about random things like potatoes and dogs. I don't know. The dogs make sense. Potatoes, less so. But it was so it was fan fiction and being able to really develop characters and my writing style over a lot of years of writing Pern fan fiction.
Wow. When did you first get started writing?
I wrote a story about Idaho potatoes when I was about 6. Again, not sure why. Who knows how 6-year-olds think? My first fan fiction started probably when I was 13 or 14, so a long time now. Yeah.
Wow, that's early.
I mean, it wasn't good. Now, if we're asking like when I started to get like slightly better, that was probably a lot more recently. But yeah.
Pern fan fiction, particularly on AOL, because yes, I too. That's actually where Marisa and I met. I was trying to be discreet about it, but Pern fan fiction back in the day, particularly on the AOL Pern boards, was it skewed really young. Like you had a lot of young 12, 13, 14-year-olds, mostly girls, but there were some boys in there too, who were living out the dream of being their own dragon rider by essentially writing a character that was themselves, and doing a self-insert and putting themselves on the back of dragons and writing stories about it. So
that's actually my first novel that I actually wrote. So I was always a little bit of a rebel, and my dad was in the Navy, so he was always out to sea. So I was like trying to get attention any way you can at like 8 and 9. So I was reading Stephen King, not because I necessarily liked him, but just because it shocked everybody. Like, what is this kid doing reading Stephen King? That's not age appropriate. So I remember my mom taking the Stephen King book for me. I think it was even It was the book. But I remember my mom taking it and handing me Orson Scott Card's The Homecoming Saga and the Dragon Riders of Pern books. And she said, "You'll like these better." And then it was off to the races from there. Thanks, Mom, if you're listening.
Yeah. I read Hardy Boys.
Same.
I read Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew.
I read those too. Yeah,
That's
I
as
love
far
those.
as
The box cover kids.
I mean, let's be clear. I
Me
read
too.
everything I could get my hands on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to move from the little library near our house to the bigger, more central library for the city because I had read everything there was. And this is before the local library had the inner library system where they would transfer books if you asked. Nerd, I know.
Nerd.
Right.
So let's move on now that we've talked about our love of the genre to the specific Catsassin book. So we'll start with Kacey because you sort of started this ball and then you just sort of drug Marisa along with you. So where did the idea that became the Catsassins as you see them now sort of germinate for you?
So when I got involved with the Four Horsemen universe, it was because Chris Kennedy sent me an invitation to participate in, actually the second anthology was the one I was originally invited to participate in. And I got this email, and I knew Chris, like we were vaguely Facebook friends. I knew he had redshirted me in one of his books because he needed a helicopter pilot, and I was like, "Hey, I'm one. You can use my name." But I didn't know him very well. So I got this email saying, "Hey, we're putting together this anthology set in this universe." And the invitation included a universe Bible that was actually really comprehensive. And I was kind of impressed by that. And so, but I didn't really know Chris very well. And I was only very peripherally, aware of what the Four Horsemen universe was. And so I went to a couple of my friends, notably Dr. Rob Hampson, also known as Speaker to Lab Animals, he's one of those people like JR that knows everybody. So I was like, "Hey, Speaker, do you know this guy? Like, what is this? Is this legit?" And he said, "Yes, absolutely. I got invited too. You should definitely do it. They're going to blow up. They're going to be big. You need to participate in this." And I was like, "Okay, sure." So I read through the Bible again, this time with a little more intent. And one of the things that was so attractive to me was in the invitation, they said, "Look, our story is mostly about mercenary races. There's enough room for pretty much everyone to come up with one mercenary race of their own if they're interested, but no more than that." And I loved the idea of creating a new alien race. But my mind kept kind of going away from mercenary and more towards like the covert side of things. And so I sent Chris Kennedy an email and said, "Hey, just out of curiosity, how would say like assassins work in this universe? Do they exist? Is that something that you guys even want to go there?" And he wrote back and he said, "Yes, in fact, I have this scene here that I'm, from my current work in progress," because this was before Golden Horde was released. And he sent me the initial scene that featured the Depik assassin. And I had in the back, I have 2 cats and I love them. And one of the things that I love about them is the juxtaposition of the basically world's perfect hunter and, super cuddly fuzzy monster. You know what I mean? That like just purrs and loves on you. Right. So I had in the back of my head been thinking about like, well, they have a doggish race. They have, slugs and snails and insects and everything, but I don't see anything feline oriented. Wonder if they'd let me do a race of cats. And sure enough, that's what this assassin that Chris had already written was about. And I was like, okay, I want them. I want to write about them in my story. He was like, cool. And so that's kind of where that came from. And what hooked me into writing the story and creating the universe, or not creating the universe, but playing in the universe.
And what about you, Marisa? So we know how the sort of Catsassins germinated with Chris Kennedy and Kacey, but what was your first take on that when she sent you the Universe Bible and the short story and said, you're going to play in the sandbox?
Oh, man. My first take was, heck yes, because I never get bored of saying Catsassins. Like I say it a lot. It really makes me happy. And then the universe itself was so cool. So I was really excited to play in it. And Kacey, as she does, laid out a very clear path for me. So step 1, write your own short story. So you get like in it. Step 2, let's start figuring out what we're going to do in our big Catsassin extravaganza. So I got to write, so Kacey was saying before that there are 3 short stories that sort of lead up to the novel. So 2 of them are in The Good, the Bad, and the Murk, the 3rd anthology of short stories from the Four Horsemen. And so I got to do that, and I got to really play with the idea that cats like to play with their prey. So that was really fun. And then I'm hooked, right? Like anytime you get to write about somebody like really playing with something they're about to murder, it's kind of fun.
Right.
Yes.
So
the cats do that by default.
True. Now this is a little off topic, but I just want to know: does your therapist know what you say?
I feel like this is a very healthy way. It's a very healthy way to express, these interests.
When she said that, everyone, my mental image was that scene where that and the guy's got the crazy face and that butcher knife. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, you like Stephen King. It's a little bit defining. Just all work and no play. It's fine.
I actually don't. I don't like Stephen King. I only read it just to get a reaction.
Gotcha.
Right. As a kid, I was always more into the fantasy. I got into the science fiction as I got more mature. Not to say that fantasy is immature, so I don't want any hate mail, please. But we'll take this natural break in the conversation for a word from our sponsor.
Nearly a century ago, humanity was contacted by intelligent alien life. It didn't go as we expected. Our primitive technology, minimal resources, and unsophisticated society was laughably commonplace on the galactic scale. They didn't need us. At least, not until they saw us fight. In the midst of talks, terrorists killed the alien ambassador. The ambassador's mercenary forces attacked in retribution, and millions died. Humanity fought back. We learned that of the thousands of races in the galaxy, only 36 had the will and temperament to make war for money. We were the 37th. Soon, our mercenary companies took up the battle cry, kill aliens, get paid, and get paid we did. It's now 100 years later, and not everyone is happy with our success as a mercenary race. In fact, some want us dead. This is the Four Horsemen universe, where a personal battle mech suit and a magnetic accelerator cannon may mean the difference between living in riches and dying on some alien shore. Think you have what it takes? Find out at chriskennedypublishing.com.
Okay, welcome back. So I'm curious, I guess we'll start with Kacey. What would you say, which author, movie, or series would you say most influences your writing?
Well, I probably have I have a lot of answers depending on what specifically I'm working on. Obviously, I've mentioned this multiple times before, but obviously Anne McCaffrey was a huge influence on my life as a whole, but also on my style as a writer, because she had such a marvelous way of bringing her characters to life and making them real people. And that's something that I definitely aspire to. But to give a kind of a more specific example, I've alluded to this before, but I love the noir genre, with the gritty detectives and yada, yada, all those things. So whenever I'm working on a noir story, one of the things that I'll do is I'll go back and I'll reread Raymond Chandler's, usually Farewell, My Lovely, because Chandler in particular has such a gorgeous turn of phrase that really lended itself to that mood of, the sort of seamy underside of the city and humanity and, all this sort of gritty darkness. And yet there's still that thread of hope or beauty or whatever, whatever sort of positive attribute you want to focus on. That's still there. And it's just sort of shining in the muck of everything else. That got really convoluted. I apologize for that. But that's an example.
That works.
Right now, so my solo novel is called Minds of Men. And that's out with Chris Kennedy Publishing. When it's set in 1943, basically in the air war over occupied Europe. And when I was writing that, you can ask Marisa, because I was talking to her about it. Like I would read things, stories set in that time and listen to music from that time and things of that time, just if nothing else, just to help me build the mood so that I could get my head kind of the way that, thinking the way as close to the way as my characters would think as possible, if that makes sense.
Sure. So
as much as I could.
As much as
I could. So the sequel to Minds of Men it's tentatively titled The World Asunder, and it's essentially a Cold War spy thriller. So I've been reading a lot of John le Carré lately to try and sort of wrap my mind around that aesthetic in order to infuse it into The World Asunder. So
that makes sense to me. Yeah.
All right. So what? I was going to say, Marisa, what about you? What do you think is your biggest influence on your writing?
Yeah, I was trying to think while Kacey was answering, but then I got distracted listening to her answer. So, no, it's not. It's definitely not.
See, it's not just me.
I will say for sure, Anne McCaffrey. I love that her characters. The world was so interesting. The characters are not just like, I am a perfect snowflake and I'm going to do these things. Like they had conflict and they were complicated. And I think you can go back and forth all day of if the novels are science fiction or fantasy, but I liked the blending of them, to your earlier point. And then I'm still a baby author, so I'm still developing in my voice. So I can't say that Terry Pratchett has deeply influenced my writing, but I would love for his writing to deeply influence mine. Just the ability to like slip in some humor in a situation that is like perfectly appropriate and also like makes you pause in your reading so you can like belly laugh for 5 minutes and then get back to it. And I love how he can work that into dramatic situations to like, let's learn about death. Like he's man. So I'm going to name those two for now.
So we always put in the show notes what we've talked about, the author links, etc. And so since we mentioned Anne McCaffrey and Terry Pratchett today, just so in case you want to check it out yourself, we will throw that in the show notes, a link to their books on the Zon. So that way, if you're curious, you can see what all the fuss is about. But really, if you haven't read them, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, you should totally go check them out, and you're welcome.
Of course, when they read all through the night and they miss the bus and then they're late to work and their boss fires them. I'm just saying sometimes
sometimes it's worth it.
Well, but sometimes it's greater good. Can I add one more real quick while I'm thinking about it? So very recently I read a book and then lost my mind over how good it was, particularly with regard to the world building. And the book is called Witchy Eye by DJ Butler. It's out from Baen right now. In fact, I think the mass market paperback, I think released yesterday. But oh my gosh, it's so good. The world building in it blew me away. And yes, so it's an epic flintlock fantasy set in North America in the 1700s, but it's a very different North America than what we know from our own history. So super, super cool. Definitely go check that out. And bonus, the e-arc of the sequel, Witchy Winter, is available on Bane's website right now. And that one comes out, I think, in April. So, yes, that I would definitely, just like Marisa said about Terry Pratchett, I would definitely like DJ Butler's world building to influence mine. Yes, please. And thank you.
Okay, that's going on the list.
All right, that's also. So, sorry about that. I accidentally hit the mute button. So that'll go on the list at the bottom of the show notes if you want to check that out. DJ Butler's The Witchy Eye series, book 1, The Witchy Eye. So it's always interesting, and I'm sure since it's you said it was Bane Books.
Yep.
So I'm sure if audio books are more your thing, they'll probably have one coming out soon because they generally pair those together. So your series, I'm curious because obviously nobody's read it since it's just coming out. But is it following the same character from the Gilded Cage, or is it just the same species?
Marisa, you want to take this one?
Yes, but make sure I don't spoil anything. Like, just hard interrupt me. Yes, question mark. So, Gilded Cage and then Under the Skin from The Good, the Bad, and Merc it helps set up some of the interactions in the novel. So same species, you'll see some familiar names. Reading the short stories is not required to enjoy Assassin, but may add some moments. That's the hope.
Outstanding. So did you bring the drug addict along?
Yes. So the main characters in Assassin are the four. The main character in Gilded Cage is a human drug addict who interacts with one of these Catsassins, and that individual Catsasin, her name is Rio. The main characters of Assassin are Rio's 4 children, and the human drug addict who became Rio's pet in the first story, Gilded Cage, spoiler alert, was she's essentially like she's lived with these assassins since they were kittens, and essentially raised them like kind of like a nanny sort of. So yeah, so she's a major player in the story as well. And there's a few other human interactions that occur, but one of the things that was fun about it, honestly, for me was writing a story and writing a book and trying to make sure that I was thinking about things the way I imagine a cat would, not the way a human would, because all of the points of view characters are all, they're all Catsassins, so.
That's all cats think about all day is
and
murder.
Food and sometimes sleep.
This is why you should get a dog.
Oh yeah, that's it.
I mean, I have dogs. I'm a little bit betraying my novel here, but I have dogs, and they snuggle and murder less, but drool a lot more. So.
All right. So this is sort of a surprise question I didn't give you in the prepared notes. But so Marisa, what do you feel you've added? Because I've read the Gilded Cage. That's all I've read so far. I haven't had a chance to read the follow-on short stories, although they're certainly on my ever-growing TBR list. But what do you feel like you've added to the universe or to this story from the base that started with Gilded Cage?
Oh man. Well, I added at least one explosion, so there's that. You're welcome. I don't know. The amazing thing about co-writing a novel is I am not entirely sure what I added versus what Kacey did, because we did a lot of like video chats and brainstorming, and like half the ideas I had I would not have had if I hadn't been bouncing ideas off of her. So I'm going to go with, I added an explosion, maybe a little bit of humor, and one of my favorite fight scenes that I've ever written.
Outstanding. So
can I chime in on that?
Absolutely.
Because I know exactly what Marisa added. Marisa added the main bad guy. She added the antagonist was all hers. A lot of the major conflict was all hers. I had sort of like this vague idea of, okay, there's got to be some conflict between these, this group of characters and this group of characters. And she was like, okay, so let me drill down, and how about we do this, 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 and this? And I, about fell out of my chair because I loved it so much. So yeah.
I think that's a cool thing about co-writing, about brainstorming together, because JR and I are doing that. And ideas just build off each other.
They absolutely can. And it was funny too, synergy. Because one of the things that made, I think, this so successful is Marisa and I had written together a lot in the Pern fan fiction world. And so it was, there were times when there were certain scenes that, we would have to tackle, and we'd say, hey, can we write this together? Like like old school fan fiction style, where you're hopping POV, sentence by sentence, because each character is experiencing the scene, through their, which is not something that you would want, in a finished product. So we would go back afterwards and rewrite the scene through a single point of view. But it really helped to be able to kind of get everything flowing and structure the scene and sort of figure out what everyone was doing, when there's all these other events going on in the background. And that was not something that I'd done with a co-writer before. And I'm not sure I could do it, honestly, with someone other than Marisa or someone who I hadn't had that fan fiction experience with before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that. So this is, so far there are 3 short stories out in this Catsassins, and there is this novel, which is releasing any second now. So where do you see the series overall? Like, do you have a grand sort of plan for it, or are you just sort of winging it and seeing where each book takes you?
Yes, there is a plan.
Yes.
Is this where we insert the Jeopardy music?
Like Mr. Something is around the corner music, I think.
Yeah. Ooh, yes, I like that. Okay, so in order to answer that question, you'd have to be giving spoilers. So we will move on, I guess. I tried, people. I tried to get the answers for you. I know. I feel like a horrible investigative.
We're practicing to be the Robert Jordan of military science fiction. Read and find out.
So before we move on to the other part of the interview that we always do, I have to ask, these Dragon Riders of Pern fan fiction.
Oh my God.
Any way we get to read those?
No.
Yeah, you know what you can do though? You can ask Todd McCaffrey if he wants to do a Pern anthology, and then heck yes, you can read our fan fiction. I know.
I mean, I'm not afraid of being told no.
I think you do it.
What's his name? All right, people, this is going to happen. I'm going to track this guy down. So if you see me on the evening news, local author arrested.
I
don't know how I ended up in his bedroom, officer.
Oh, gosh. In all seriousness, Todd McCaffrey is one of the most genuinely kind individuals I've ever met. So please don't go stalk him.
He's awesome. It'll be fine.
Some people call it stalking. I just call it persistence.
Oh, geez.
Okay, all jokes aside, I am not endorsing or encouraging anyone to stalk anyone, please. Disclaimer. All right, so
I can edit that part out.
So much for all those boxes of crowns I was going to send you to eat. All right. So once we get done talking about the books, we generally like to ask, since it's science fiction authors and there's that word science-ish in there, and then we also like to talk about what they're reading. So that's what we're going to jump off to now. So we'll start with what science fiction books are you reading in the genre for your breaks in writing?
I just finished Wool by Hugh Howey. Apparently it was a whole, I'm super late to the game. It was like this huge thing in like 2012 or 2014. But I've been super into post-apocalyptic stuff lately. And this is people living in a silo underground and the world is poison. And he pulls the rug under you like 3 chapters in a row. You're like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Oh, no. Okay, this is what's going to happen. Oh, no. So, but it was really, really enjoyable. So I've got the sequel, which is a prequel, teed up, and Alpha Contracts, which is the origin of the Four Horsemen universe, also teed up and ready to go. So a break and research.
Let's see. So I've been on again, off again, sort of going through Chuck Gannon's Terran Republic series with his Kane Reardon character, which if you're into some hard sci-fi, that is top of the line stuff right there. And Kane Reardon he's like it's kind of like 007 meets hard science fiction, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it's really, really good stuff. So I've been reading that. I too have alpha contracts teed up and ready to go. Because obviously I'm writing in the Four Horsemen universe, so I'm really invested in it. It seems really cool. And then, other than that, I'm midway through Witchy Winter, which is not science fiction. It's fantasy, but it's amazing. And I'm sort of drowning in joy reading it. So once that's done, I'll go back to the sci-fi stuff.
Okay. Are you planning on Marisa the Wolfe book? I think there's a sequel to that, isn't there? Are you planning on reading that one?
Yeah, it's Dust, I think. Or it's another one-word thing. And yes, it is on my Kindle. And, once I get caught up on my writing goals that I'm a little behind on, then yes, I get to reward myself with that.
Okay, so I just Googled it, so we're not, making stuff up. It's book 2 is Shift and book 3 is Dust.
Sweet.
So for the trilogy. So anyway, don't want to steer anybody wrong, so we try to correct ourselves. But so you're planning on reading them. You're hooked enough. You're going to keep going.
I am. Yeah, I want to know. You bury people in silos. I want to know what happens.
Outstanding. I mean, I wouldn't mind my own bunker just in case. Just saying.
I think you can buy them in like North Dakota or South. Actually, I think in South Dakota, there's like old school missile launch facilities that they'll sell you, and you can rehab them as a house.
You think I could sell my wife on that?
Right?
I mean,
dude, you know
I'm just thinking of all the possibilities. I mean,
they are big enough. I know that they are big enough that you can have an indoor underground swimming pool facility.
Obviously. I mean, how else are you going to survive the zombie apocalypse?
Right?
I mean, obviously you need that. Gosh,
yeah, I've got to get on this, man.
Absolutely.
Whew. All right, people, coming to you from a bunker in South Dakota, you said? All right, and what about you, Kacey? This Terran Republic. So, is that one that you're hooked on enough that you're going to keep reading the universe?
Oh, absolutely. So, Chuck Gannon's another friend of mine, and he gave me the second book, and I was like, oh, that's very clever of you to give me the second book in the series. And he said, oh, but the first one's free on online. So I read the first two, and yeah, they're really, really good. It's, again, he's got such comprehensive world building, really complex and interesting characters that, like, to the point where sometimes they do things and I get angry at them, like angry at the characters.
And what's just because it sounds interesting, I want to look it up. You said, what was the name of the first book?
The first book is Fire with Fire by Charles Gannon. And all of them are available from Baen. And the first one is Fire with Fire is available on Baen.com as part of their Baen free library. So that's listed as just for people looking it up, it's the Kane Reardon series is the name of that series. I think the name of the series is actually the Terran Republic.
According to Amazon. I mean, that doesn't mean they're right. It's Amazon.
Okay.
It could go either way.
Sure.
But I only know that because I pulled it up because I was curious. The covers are pretty sweet though, man.
Right?
That's sexy.
Yeah, some really cool art. Bob Eggleston, I think, is the artist who does Chuck's covers, and his work is amazing.
Bob, if you're listening, call me. just saying.
Smart.
So, all right. Well, then the other stuff we like to talk about besides the books is obviously the science that I alluded to in my horrible transition. I'm working on it, people. So what scientific breakthroughs are you guys following? We'll start with Marisa this time. Is there anything in the science community that's just got you super excited?
Oh my goodness. Yes, so many things. One, I have read every article I can find about this just to try to understand it. They can now make particles with negative mass. And while they were quick to tell us, to say in every article, like, this doesn't mean that faster than light engines are going to immediately make wormholes. We don't have it. That's not what it's going to do. It's going to make lasers better. But it's still so cool because even 2 years ago, we thought that was impossible. And so anytime we have some kind of breakthrough, we're like, hey, JK, that's not at all impossible. We're doing it right now in like Sweden. That's freaking awesome. I said frickin', guys.
I heard. We're good.
I was thinking,
Okay, cool.
negative mass,
effort.
that's a requirement for faster than light travel. Step 1 is done.
I know that. I think that seriously, every article, like the second paragraph, they're like, we don't know how to use this yet for faster than light
But
travel.
step
Do
1
not
is
go
done.
there.
That's fantastic.
I mean, right? That, and then step 3 is profit.
Mm-hmm.
So we got this. So that is really exciting. I also got to go to a talk from some folks from the Smithsonian earlier this week. And so got to see the Mars rover 2020 and how it's shaping up. And its whole focus is to like dig specifically for biological matter and test for that, which is really, really cool. And then on Earth, they found like gold bugs. I mean, like there's all these new species coming up all the time. And I don't know, it gets me really excited.
I get all excited too. So what are you following this time, Chris? And then we'll go to Kacey.
I'm still giggling maniacally over the failure of self-driving cars. I am so glad that these things are failing. I hope they put it off for another 50 years because just the idea of a 2 to 10 ton semi truck driving down the road, making its own decisions as to who dies if there's a wreck, that frightens me. So I'm glad they're still experiencing failure. I think they need a lot more failure before I'm going to be comfortable that they've got it right.
Okay. So what about you, Kacey? What sciences are your breakthroughs are you following?
So I mentioned my friend, Dr. Hampson earlier. He and his team have been working for a number of years on, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's essentially a memory prosthetic. And that is something that really sort of fires my imagination because I've had people in my family have Alzheimer's and dementia and things of that nature, and those sorts of like neurological degenerative diseases are just, the effects of them are so heartrending on families and stuff. And so to be able to effect some kind of cure for those sorts of things. Now, Dr. Hampson will be the first to tell you that's not what they're at. That's not the point where they're at. It's kind of like, with Marisa's negative mass particles, this is not faster than light travel. Well, this is not an Alzheimer's cure, but it's a step. It's a step in the right direction. And that just makes me giddy. So the advances in sort of, and also too, I got to be honest with you, I've always been really fascinated on the science fiction side of things with the intersection between technology and biology and the idea of cybernetics and, genetic engineering, all of those kinds of things. We have so much of our science is turned outward, but I dig the stuff that's kind of turned inward too. Yeah.
So this sounds a little bit like science is caught up with Johnny Mnemonic.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to talk to the speaker about it, more specific to get more specific. But yeah, it's really cool stuff, and they've had really great success with their trials, and and it's great for me because, like I said, Dr. Hampson is a personal friend, so like I kind of get the inside scoop on how things are going and what they're hoping for and stuff like that.
That's awesome. Well, what about
Okay.
What about you, JR?
So I follow all the latest publishings just because, obviously the same reason you all do. And they have an article on the lifescience.com, which is a pretty neat website if you don't follow it. But they have an article about now they're suspecting that oxygen isn't the only possible signature they look for signs of life. We've mentioned in last week's episode that they found microorganisms in the sulfur flats that were sulfur based. So now we're reevaluating what we think it takes to have life. And so that changes entirely because right now when we hunt the stars for planets that are suitable for life, we're always looking for basically mirror Earths. Now, part of that is because obviously if we're going to colonize it, we have to be able to live there. But now we're suspecting that maybe life can live on planets that we couldn't. So that's going to be interesting to see where that develops.
Yeah.
It's another example of science catching up with science fiction,
Yeah. I think definitely. So that's the one I'm following. So it definitely gives you ideas for stories.
Mm-hmm.
It sure does.
Absolutely.
That's why we all got quiet.
Absolutely.
We're all going, how could I use this?
I know.
And what did you say step 3 was, Risa? Profit.
That's right.
Profit. That's how we're going to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's interesting. I do wonder if we're going to colonize the stars much the way Australia was colonized and started as a penal colony.
Well, that was sort of the premise behind Tom Kratman's Terra Nova, right? And in his what's the name of his A Desert Called Peace, which is it's a phenomenal book. It's very dark. But it's essentially they find a twin Earth, and the world government takes all of its quote unquote undesirables and throws them there. Well, lo and behold, when you get all the undesirables together, there's a revolution. So.
Yeah,
I could see that.
Wasn't that a little bit like with The Expanse? The people who went out to the belt were like I don't think they were criminals, but they were like the desperate and the poor, because it was so unsafe. And then how that continued to affect society like hundreds of years later.
I mean, that's true of America too. I mean, look at who originally colonized.
Absolutely.
So
Louisiana, yeah.
All right, and it's called, the name of the book is what? A Desert Called Peace?
A Desert Called Peace by Tom Kratman. It's very military oriented, very, very heavily military influenced storyline. Very dark, but very good.
All right, so that'll be in the show notes as well, people. So that way you can check it out yourself. And anything else,
No,
Chris?
I think we're good.
So why don't you tell people how they well, actually, that would be rude. The ladies first. So ladies, how can the listeners find you?
So you can find me at www.kaceyezell.net. That's my website. And if you go there and sign up for my mailing list, if you do so right now, you will get, well, actually, by the time this comes out, you won't get the first chapter of Assassin anymore. What you will get is a free short story set in my Psyche of War series, which is the one that I mentioned with the World War II story. So yeah, you can, and I'm also on Facebook as Kacey Ezell is my author page.
All right, and what about you, Marisa?
Nice. Facebook, Marisa Wolfe author. That's where I am. So official. And also, if you enjoy pictures of dogs as well as books, you can get me on Instagram. It's Book Dogs. So.
Outstanding. And what about us, Chris? Where can they find us?
Okay, our website is www.sfshenanigans.com. Twitter at SFS, that's Sierra, Foxtrot Sierra _show. And our email is podcast at sfshenanigans.com.
Outstanding. So go check us out, people. All that information will be in the show notes.
Shenanigans.
Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Chris Winder, I'm J.R. Handley, and this was the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of space and all things that go boom. All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that archived episode that was in the digital memory hole that we found. We thought you'd enjoy it. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the archive for the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back at our regular scheduled time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.